Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Man Cave Annex here at Wistful Vistas in beautiful suburban San Diego, California. The purpose of this video is to go over the ownership experience as completely as I can with this 2014 BMW S1000R. I affectionately refer to it as the Red Baron. I think you can see why. It is a beautiful shade of red. But we're going to try to cover four areas. First is my ownership experience. What have I experienced with it, i.e. the reliability. The second is the costs. What are the costs associated with owning this machine? And I'll try to be as complete as possible. By the way, I'm relying on my cheat sheet. Hope you don't mind me glancing away now and then. Third would be the mods. I have not done many on this machine, but there are a few, and I think they might be useful for other people with this specific model of bike and naked bikes in general to take a look at. And lastly, I want to cover my likes and dislikes. That seems to be something that people ask quite often. So I'm going to cover all four of those and we'll get into it, and maybe you can learn a little bit from my own personal journey with this machine, the 2014 BMW S1000R, also known as the Red Baron. I'm not going to cover aesthetics, in other words, the appearance of the motorcycle. I think out there individually people can make up their own minds, and they can make up their own minds as shoppers. I hope to make them more informed shoppers, of course, in this review, but in other words, aesthetics, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. But I do want to talk about my ownership experience, which has been rather positive on the overall with this machine. I bought this used in 2014, late 2014, at BMW Escondido. Does it sound familiar? Escondido is a community near here where there are a couple of motorcycle dealerships. Quite convenient, nice ride over there around Lake Hodges, by the way. So I purchased it used. Interestingly enough, this machine had been purchased by a gentleman in the summer of that year who bought a single R version and a double R version at the same time. The machine, he put about 360 or 70 miles on it, I can't recall exactly, and it sat in his garage for nearly a year before he took a look at it and said, I don't need two BMW S1000Rs, and evidently decided on the single R. I saw it in the showroom. I knew these were very capable machines. I knew that I was wanting to step up to something around a liter bike, and all the reviews were generally positive about this. It's typically in the top 5 of the naked sport bike reviews every year, so it appealed to me. What's my ownership experience been like? When I first purchased the machine, the quick shifter this year has a quick shifter up. No auto blipper down, quick shifter up, manual down. Later models have the auto blipper down. But 2014, auto shift or quick shifter up. And when I first purchased it, the quick shifter would not work. And after a couple of weeks of a little bit of back and forth, what it took the dealership was they had to download the ECU and reload it, I guess just wake the bike up all over again. And we all suspected that that had to do with it just really languishing and sitting in one place for a year. So that was about the first 2 weeks of ownership. A little bit disappointing, a little scary, but understandable on the basis. The other ownership issue I've had with it happened to be about the front brakes. And the front brakes, when I first purchased the machine and now, are absolutely perfect. But after about a year of ownership and a day of riding in a typically warm San Diego day, the front lever, the front brake lever, would go very spongy. I never lost function of the brakes, but it would go very spongy. I went back to the dealership twice in that first year to have the brakes bled and examined. No fluid leaks. People always say that. The brakes would bleed, come right back, and ultimately the master cylinder was replaced, and that completely solved the problem. Again, a little bit of an issue and sort of a pain in the posterior, but to BMW's credit, and this is quite a good company in my opinion, to BMW's credit, they covered that master cylinder and the labor associated with it under warranty. So I'm not going to complain. And as I say, I never lost brake function, it just got a little spongy. And really, other than those two issues, I have never had a single issue with this machine. In fact, when I get on this and I ride over distances, I always feel that it's going to start on the button, it's going to stop, and it's going to go fast, as much as I want to go fast. So that's my ownership experience. Two issues, if you can call them, well, they are issues. I think you certainly can call them issues. But two issues, and that's in 4 years of ownership. So got to give them top marks on reliability. Every other aspect of this machine has been top notch. All right, I said I wasn't going to mention aesthetics, but since we're in a forward or head-on view of this machine, you can see these Popeye headlights. And when people mention detractions, they think appearance-wise that frequently comes up for mention. And I note the 2019 RR now has symmetrical headlights, so maybe BMW felt the sting of that a little bit. But let's talk about the cost of ownership of this machine. I purchased it for $13,042.90. New ones today are about $16,500 thereabouts. So the price of the S1000R has remained remarkably stable over the production run. There are various upgrades to the machine, but essentially it remains the same chassis, the same controls, some of the same features. And that was a pretty good price because that includes, by the way, tax and license out the door. I think my actual purchase price was around $12,000, and that's on a brand new machine, literally, with about 370 miles on it. So big first cost, but I happen to get it at the beginning of the next model year, but a very good price for that. I've done 3 services on the machine. I don't put enough miles on a motorcycle. I ride for pleasure, I do not commute, and I look for fun roads to ride around. And my typically middle of the week ride will be 200, 250 miles, maybe sometimes 100 miles. It's time dependent. So generally what I do is, instead of having my motorcycle serviced to the mileage, I get a yearly, I call it a yearly checkup. There's probably a better way to put it, a yearly service. But in that yearly checkup, they look for things like chain tension, brake fluid, coolant fluids, and details like that. So when I do that, BMWs are not inexpensive to service, but you know these people have been trained rather well. They keep a pretty tight control hierarchy on their dealerships. And that service typically costs around $350 per visit. And for that price, by the way, I get a coolant flush. I generally get an oil flush change, filter change, and the other hour or so the technician spends checking it all to spec, reading it out. So it's about let's call it $350 a year if you choose the route that I did. Now, many of these things people can do on their own, and if you do, I applaud you for it. And quite honestly, I could probably do it on my own, but at the same time, I don't want to take shortcuts with safety features, so I paid the dealership to do that. So about $350 a year for me in service costs. This machine cost me somewhere around $300 to $350 to insure. Now, this is the most subjective comment because I'm an older guy. I have a relatively clean driving record. We won't go into that, but relatively clean, let's call it that way. So my insurance would be more reasonable, let's say, than a young person, particularly if you acquired this as your first machine. They might haul you to cleaners and have you pay through the nose for it. But I'm going to say this is a relatively inexpensive machine to repair because BMWs have the reputation of not shedding parts and not being maintenance intensive or large large maintenance costs intensive that the insurance company might have to face up to. So insurance, as I say, around that price. It costs me somewhere around $150, $160 per year to license this machine. That is, we get a little sticker in California, we put it on the back of our license plate, and that says, yes, indeed, I have paid to use the California roads for another year. Thank you, officer. So about $150, that's pretty reasonable for any kind of a vehicle. For instance, I can't imagine a car being less expensive than $300 or $400. So if someone were to use this bike on a full-time basis for a commuter, that license charge is certainly very reasonable. And so there you have it. That's really all the costs associated with the machine. The acquisition costs, the annual service I get done, and the license and insurance. Other than relatively expensive machine to buy, it's a relatively inexpensive machine to own and maintain. Ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your hats. Family and friends, we're going to go mobile to discuss the mods to the Red Baron. So hang in there while we cover the not too many things that I did to this machine to personalize it for my own use. One of the first things I did was exchange the stock BMW levers for aftermarket CRG levers. These are adjustable here, and they also will come up or down so that they'll fold by means of absorbing an impact perhaps better, something I haven't had to do, thankfully. But I don't have the largest hands, and this little adjustability is very nice to bring it in and out. Second thing I did was, I don't know if this will come out all that well, but this is just a little styrofoam or foam overlay that goes over the grip, and Grip Puppies is their name. They're like $10 or $15, and I prefer a little bit of a larger grip, and they also give some cushioning to the ride. The other thing are these rear view mirror extenders. Try to say that without screwing it up. But these are rear view mirror extenders. This little piece right here is actually what is doing the work, and it takes it out about 2 or 3 inches and just takes that mirror over to the side and makes it so that your shoulder is not the most of what you see when you're looking backwards. The other nice thing about them, as I step away a bit, and I hope it comes out, is that the mirror doesn't extend out that much further than your handlebar, so it doesn't interfere with your ability to filter as you go through the lanes. I did purchase an aftermarket windscreen by Puig. I've had several different bits of advice from Spanish-speaking friends. I don't want to insult anybody who speaks Spanish as a native tongue, but this is a little larger. The stock windscreen that comes with a BMW, they call it a bikini fairing, and it really aptly fits the name because it's just very small. It just covers the backside of the instrument cluster. This does push a little more wind back over the top of you, but just know that when you're riding a naked machine, that wind is part of the game. That's one of the reasons that you do it. The other thing that I did was purchase an aftermarket seat by a company called Sargent, and that's been very nice. It's very comfortable. This part of the seat has a very nice grippy material to it. It's a little wider in the back and adds a measure of comfort. I would recommend that. Sargent, I think, makes a really good product, and you get the grip and at the same time retain the comfort. The other thing that I did was purchase this tank bag by SW-Motech. It mounts on top of the tank, as you can see, and what you need to do to fit it to your tank is install this little ring on top of your filler neck. Slips on there. To take it off, you just pull a little string on the front of it. Not sure that'll come out. And the capacity, interestingly, although it looks quite small, is just about right for carrying all manner of things that are sort of useful to have on the road, including a piece of 2x4, so you can haul lumber in it. But I use it to keep my wallet and bottle of water and some things, so that's a very nice thing to have on a naked bike. I did install a cell phone holder on it, and this is before I found out about the SP Connect units, and the cell phone fits inside there, and there's plenty of room on the BMW handlebar to accommodate that. Beyond that, this machine is stock and has been very satisfying, as I mentioned earlier, to own. So that's it. That's the list of the mods. Ladies and gentlemen, final phase of this presentation of my ownership experience with the 2014 BMW S1000R, the Red Baron, and that will be likes and dislikes. Won't take too long. There aren't many dislikes in this machine. Very, very few. So let's get right down to the likes. I do like the heated grips. Even in California, I was surprised at how nice it is on a chilly morning to be able to flip that heat switch on and feel the warmth. And it works quite well. In fact, the high, there are two settings, high and low, and the high setting can get almost uncomfortably warm. Low setting, I find, is perfect for California. Surprisingly liked it. I thought, who would ever use that? But surprisingly liked it. Second thing I like is the cruise control. Once again, something on a motorcycle I really didn't think would mean all that much to me. But you're heading out to your roads, you're going to be doing a lot of cruising, and you're going to be riding freeways, and the cruise control happens to be perfect for doing that. It's very intuitive, very easy to set up, and very precise. You can hit 1 mile per hour increments and it'll do its thing very, very nicely. Third thing that I like is the quick shifter up. It's very precision. There's probably half an inch of movement. Is that half an inch? Probably half an inch of movement to get that to kick up into the next gear. Very, very finely engineered. Compared to some other machines where you've got an inch or so, inch and a half sometimes, to kick it up into that next gear. This one just pops right in, and the electronics are spot on perfect. So staying on the likes and mentioning electronics, let's go into the electronics because this is a very advanced machine. The suspension is active, and you can set your riding preferences via the dashboard. So there are 3 settings, soft, road, and race. And you can definitely feel a difference in the suspension response and stiffness as you dial up through those 3 settings. Soft, we have, particularly when I get into some of the back roads in San Diego, we have some pretty bumpy roads, and that soft setting just allows you to absorb it right up. I spend most of my time riding in the road setting. The sport setting is useful for freeways and really tabletop smooth surfaces. And along with that road and race, you get attendant. You do have the chance to modify some of these, but you get differences in throttle response and traction control and those other things. So the electronics on this machine, and carrying on that electronics theme once again, the engine control, the fueling is absolutely superb. Probably about the best in any machine I've ridden. Credit it to the engineering at BMW for that, and perhaps they're being part of a very large car company that allows them to have that R&D that might cross over. But the fuel mapping and the response is excellent. Last thing I'll mention on the like side, there are more. The last thing though that I'll mention on the like side is this machine's response. Throttle response is top notch, really works well. It's plenty fast, plenty fast. The stock exhaust system, I have never been tempted to change the stock system on this because it just burbles along, and I love it on the over rev coming down. You can hear it burble and pop as you go down and get ready to go down into the next gear, which is manual on this machine. So all in all, a very, very likable machine. Dislikes. I said there were going to be a few of them, and in fact it's hard to think of those that you wouldn't like. I would have to say that the lack of an auto blipper, and it's not really the machine's fault, not all that many in 2014 had auto blippers, but that auto blipper feature I've come to find out is pretty handy to have. So lack of an auto blipper, there is no storage anywhere on the machine. A little bit of faint criticism there because there typically isn't on your standard naked machine. So that's why I had to purchase the aftermarket Motech bag here. Standard rearview mirrors. The dislike on the standard rearview mirrors was that when I first received the bike, I got about 90% of my shoulder in the rearview mirror and maybe 1/4% of actual view behind me. So that was a little bit of a pain, and that's what caused me to install those aftermarket rear view mirror extenders. Is there anything else I don't like? No, there is not. This has been a remarkably fun, consistent machine to own. Not without its imperfections and not without a couple of issues, but really, given that that is not unusual with almost any brand that you buy, very, very pleasurable to own, and I'm going to miss the Red Baron when he ultimately leaves my garage. Okay, that'll be it for my little tour of ownership experience with the BMW. This is in summary. I have been asked if I would do a side-by-side comparison or a comparison video with the Aprilia Tuono, and that will be forthcoming. That will be the last video I'll do with the Red Baron in my possession. I'll just close by saying I do really indeed hope that it helps out there in the motorcycle community for people to see what I've done with this machine. And finally and ultimately, thanks for watching.